Throughout this service, I've got to say, I certainly don't want the moment to pass, how much it thrills my heart to see the pews filled. It's just a wonderful thing. I expect that each Sunday. I'll split you out again into two services, but if you're here now, I hope you'll come back. As we work together to be the people of God, as we move forward and as we celebrate so much. Again, as I've said before, thank you, choir, thank you, Bill and Kay, for the music. Beautiful. I was talking with them and said, music really drives the service. It prepares us for everything else. It is the heart of that time when we come to worship the Lord our God, and I'm so appreciative for all who do so much there. In the Old Testament book of Nehemiah, which might seem a rather odd book to turn to for a time like this, we will find what I think is perhaps the greatest remodeling story in the entire Bible. It's the story of the restoration of the great outer protective wall of Jerusalem. Now, I've got to give you a little background, so I hope you like history. I'm going to give you a very, very short history lesson so I can bring you up to speed. The year was 444 BC. Almost 170 years earlier. The Babylonians had swept down from the north. They had invaded the land that was kept by the people of Israel. They had swept into Jerusalem. They had deported all the leading citizens of Jerusalem, leaving only those who could barely take care of themselves. And then they had destroyed the great wall that had for so long protected the people from outsiders. In essence, they had desolated Jerusalem. It would be 50 years or more before the first wave of exiles was allowed to return. And they were heartbroken over what they had found. They found a city in ruins. Its people frightened by the marauding bands of outsiders, a people in a city both that had been looted long ago of any value. They saw people in need of leadership, weakened, and they set out to work. Almost immediately, that first wave of people returning, and along with the next and the next wave, began rebuilding the city itself. But the great outer wall, for whatever reason, remained untouched. It remained in ruins for 70 years. For 70 years, even after the people began to return, they were weak. They were fearful of their surroundings, fearful of the future. They were fearful of all things. In the year 444 BC, God spoke to a man named Nehemiah. He gave Nehemiah a vision, a clear picture of a rebuilt wall, a picture of a city that was strong, a picture of the next step. Nehemiah took that vision, and he in turn did his part. He cast it before the people. And when they began to embrace it, when they began to accept it, most of the people jumped to it. And they began to rebuild the wall. Now, of course, from the very beginning, there were concerns. There were criticisms. There were those who said, it's going to cost too much money. You'll bankrupt us. We don't have the money to do this. And others who said, this is too big a project. It can't be done. We're too small. It's too much. And others who said, it will change everything. Nothing will be the same again. We shouldn't do it. But the vision lingered. And it reigned in the hearts of people. So it was that Nehemiah and the people continued the work. They struggled. they at times struggled against stones. Sometimes they struggled against each other. But they continued to work and to pray and to dream and to hope and to listen. And above all, to trust that God would both guide and protect them. Amazingly, Nehemiah says that in only 52 days, that great wall was rebuilt. In only 52 days, what they had thought could not be done was done. And thus began another time of change and transformation for these people. They looked out and they saw what had been accomplished. They began to realize how important it was and how it was going to help them and move them forward. They began to get excited. It was a time for celebration, but it was also a time that had within it seeds of great danger. It was an important moment that maybe they didn't even understand. A tipping point for them. At that very moment, as they looked out and saw all that had been accomplished and saw all that could happen, began to see a vision not just for a wall, but for ministry and for the future, they could have looked at everything they'd done and said, what a good job we have done. What marvelous things we have accomplished by our hands. We could have looked out and given praise to the leaders, given credit to one another, and totally lost sight of the most important dynamic of all. All that to bring me to the scripture lesson for today. The most important two verses, I believe, in the book of Nehemiah. In fact, I've argued before that this is the climax of this book. It's found in the middle of the book, chapter 6, verses 15 and 16. Listen. So the wall was completed on the 25th day of Elul, in only 52 days. When all our enemies heard about this, and all the surrounding nations heard, they were afraid. And they lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. Don't let that pass you by. They realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. Sometimes I suspect it takes an outsider to see the truth. Sometimes I suspect it takes someone who can look at it with fresh eyes. Someone who can have a new perspective. To see what can easily get lost for those who have for so long been on the inside. In this case, it actually took enemies. People from surrounding nations to see the truth. And they were amazed. They were amazed because they clearly saw that all this had been done with the help of the people's God. Here's the amazing thing, I think. As you read the book of Nehemiah, you begin to realize that the people of God slowly but surely began to embrace this truth. It didn't come easily. And for some, perhaps not even naturally. But as they began to embrace what others were seeing clearly, the next transformation began to take place among the people. They became united. They became powerful and strong. They became focused on their future, focused on their ministry, focused on their God. As together They began to rejoice with the realization that God, all along, had been working in their midst. Whether on a day-to-day basis it felt that way or not, all along, God had been working in their midst. Good news. Something to celebrate. Good friends, may I make an observation? While I am not your enemy, I did come to you as an outsider. I came to you from another country, if you will, another town at least. I came to you with new eyes, fresh eyes, and to whatever degree, because of that, a new perspective. I wasn't involved with all that has gone on for all these years to bring us to this point. The joys, the sorrows, the good times, the bad, I wasn't involved in that. I came at the very end of a project. But I came with new eyes. And I've been excited these weeks to see what for me is a simple truth. Something that for me has been evident from the first day I came here. Something I've been trying to share with you in these short months. That God is in our midst. And that God has been working in your lives. And that it is the hand of God that brought us to this point. That's why we're here this day. We're here to celebrate. We're here to acknowledge what sometimes can only be seen with hindsight. That this work has been done with the help of our God. And that is what gives us hope. That's what can move us forward. It's what makes us always excited about being God's people. It's always tempting. It will always be a temptation to think about all that we have done. To think about our efforts and our hard work. After all, so many times we feel like we put in the time, we gave the money, we've done the work. It's so easy to focus on our efforts, to remember our struggles, to bask in our accomplishments. But it's also so easy for even God's people to lose sight of the more obvious. That in the end, all of this is done with the help of our God. And that is always as it should be. If we're going to embrace this truth, today is the day. If we're going to embrace this truth, now is the moment. And if we do embrace that truth, we're going to find the freedom to let go of the past, to fully embrace this present moment, and to, with confidence, move into the future that only God knows. But that God knows well. I'm excited to see the pews full, but I am so much more excited to know that it's full in God's house. And to know with all my heart that God is here, this moment. We did not come, whether you thought so or not, we did not come simply to give thanks for a new narthex, beautiful as it is. We didn't gather here today simply to rejoice over an expanded fellowship hall and a new Wesley building and new bathroom facilities. Important as those things are, we came to recognize that God is working in our midst. And if God's working in our midst, He has a plan for us. And if God has a plan for us, He knows we're here. And that's good news. Today, I believe it's time for us to embrace the truth. To embrace it with all the fervor that we have within us. That God is here. Today is the day then that we can walk forward in unity and in love and with power and with hope. Today is the day we can walk forward with arms wide open, with hands wide open, with eyes wide open to see the needs around us. Today is the day we can go forth with one mind, with one heart, to go out into this world, starting with one another, reaching out in the community, going beyond as God leads us. Today is that day when we consecrate new facilities, but we dedicate and rededicate not only a whole church, but ourselves. That, I hope, is why we're here. And I'm grateful for this moment. Everything we do, every decision we make, has been done with the help of our God. And that's something in which I can rejoice. Will you pray with me? But God, open our minds, open our hearts, and open our future, that we may be all that you want us to be. Use us, use these facilities as you will. But, oh God, use us. Amen. If this day you are prepared not only to consecrate facilities and dedicate a building, but far more importantly, to dedicate yourself to the living God, and I want to invite you to stand. In your bulletin is an insert, a litany of dedication, in which you have a chance to do exactly that. Will you stand?